Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inna alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam wa ba'd. Praise be to God. We seek God's help and God's forgiveness. We seek refuge with God from the evil of our own souls, from our bad deeds. Whomsoever God guides will never be led astray. Whomsoever God leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God but God, the one having no partner, and I bear witness that Muhammad is God's servant and messenger. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullahi haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who have faith, be conscious of God with all the consciousness that is due to God. Do not allow death to overtake you before you have surrendered yourselves to God. Ya ayyuhal nas ittaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahidatin wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa ba'athaha minhum rijalan kathiran wa nisa'an wa ittaqu Allah alladhi tas'aluna bihi wa rahamna inna Allaha kana alaykum raqiban. O humanity, fear your Lord, who created you from one soul, created from it its mate, and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And fear God, through whom you ask one another, and the wombs that bore you. Indeed, God is ever over you, an observer. يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ عَظِيمًا. أَمَّا بَعْدُ. God will direct you to righteous deeds, forgive your sins. Whoever obeys God and God's messenger has indeed achieved a great achievement. Good afternoon, sisters, brothers. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Amir Hussain. I teach in the Department of Theological Studies. I'm the faculty advisor for the Office of Muslim Student Life. I am not, as you probably already figured out, a khatib. For those of you that speak Arabic as your first language, my apologies for the pronunciation. I was born in Pakistan, so Urdu is my first language. Grew up in Canada, so English is my second language. French is my third language. All those are better than Arabic, which is my fourth language, but I tried. Thankfully, I think the mask hides that, so I don't think you hear the things as badly, with the mask. And I want to thank you all for wearing your masks, for keeping us safe here, following the mask mandates, both at LMU and LA County. And it's weird to say this in the third week, but welcome to the new semester at LMU. If you can for a few minutes, just please stop by, talk to us, say hello to each other, and say hello to Kinan, who directs our Office of Muslim Student Life. I'll say more about that in the second part, about the community and connecting with each other. I'm not a khatib, I'm a teacher. It's not so much what I do, it's who I am. I didn't think much about this, being a teacher, until I heard from one of my Muslim teachers who said, and I'm quoting this almost exactly, teaching is a sacred duty, as the search for knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim. I love that line. Teaching is a sacred duty, as the search for knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim. The greatest medieval Muslim theologian, Imam Ghazali, the first book of the 40 books of the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences, is the Kitab al-Ilm, the Book of Knowledge, which begins with a series of hadith, prophetic reports about knowledge. One of them, which is sound, sahi, seeking knowledge, the Prophet said to us, is incumbent on every Muslim. Seeking knowledge is incumbent on every Muslim. That's why you're here at LMU. That's the importance of us as teachers. Not that we're better than you, not that we're smarter than you, but that's why we give importance to teachers, to help you in that search for knowledge. God gives us knowledge. God gives us teachers to help understand. One of my favorite surahs of the Quran is Surah Ar-Rahman, Surah 55. That beautiful open, just those 4 verses. Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran, Khalaq al-Insan, Allamahul Bayan. The most merciful taught the Quran, created the human being, taught it eloquence. I love that surah. If you understand Arabic poetry, Mahmoud Darwish, the national poet of Palestine, one of my favorite poems of his, 1995, like the noon in Surah Ar-Rahman. He talks about hearing this surah and his grandfather, being like the noon in Surah Ar-Rahman that holds the family together. That shows the importance of this surah. Here's this great contemporary Palestinian poet who's quoting from what? Surah Ar-Rahman, who's talking about the power of what? Surah Ar-Rahman. Listen to that surah from time to time. You're here to Amir, work on your classes, work on your assignments. Make sure you do that. I say that to your professors. But also, make time for your deen, for the religion, for salah. Come here, this space is open for you, for prayer. Read the Quran. Listen to recitations of surahs like Surah Ar-Rahman. That's one of the beauties of YouTube. You can watch your Bieber videos, you can watch your Taylor Swift videos, whatever you watch. Listen to some Quran recitation from time to time. Come together. Support each other as a community. Because we are a community. That's why we're here today. To pray together. Jummah. In community. In congregation. And I'm conscious of the fact that I think this is probably my first Jummah prayer in community. In about 18 months since the pandemic. Once the pandemic started, we're all at home. We're doing this through the YouTube channel. We're doing this through Facebook. Once things started, it's safe. Is it not safe? This is a safe space here. And so this is my first time, in 16 months praying Jummah together, as we're supposed to, in community. And again, I'll say a little bit more about the community idea in the second part of the khutbah. In the first part here, I just want to talk a little bit about how we live out our Islam here in Los Angeles, more specifically here at LMU, in a minority setting. There's something like 135 countries in the world where we live as Muslims, as minorities. That's different for many of you who may have grown up in a Muslim majority country. One of my teachers was Mahmoud Ayub, wonderful, wonderful scholar of Islam. And he would talk with us about Mecca and Medina, the cities where Islam begins. And we think of the end of the Prophet's life and the community in Medina, which was a majority Muslim community. But that's not how Islam begins. Islam doesn't begin in Medina, it begins in Mecca, as a minority community. How many of us remember this? But that's the heart of being a Muslim. Not in the majority, but in the minority. That's where we are here. How many of us are aware, remember, the emigration of the Prophet and his followers from Mecca to Medina? That begins the Islamic calendar. We're now, I think it's I have to check, 10th day, I think, of the month of Safar, here. 1,443 years since the Hijrah. That's when we date our calendar, the Hijrah, the migration from Mecca to Medina. But that's not the first Hijrah. The first one is the migration to Abyssinia. The biographers of the Prophet, Ibn Ishaq, Tabari, discuss this. You know this story as Muslims. People began to accept Islam in Mecca. They met with opposition, they met with persecution. This turned to physical persecution. The Prophet gathers a group that's most vulnerable, tells them to go across the Red Sea to what is then Abyssinia, what is now Ethiopia. The Prophet knows it's a Christian country, ruled by a Christian king. But he tells them that that Christian will protect you. And he does. The Christian king, the Negus, protects the Muslims. Even against, we use in modern political context, the extradition treaty. The Meccans want these people at the back. The Negus says, no, they're under my protection. I will not send them back to you. And they stay there in Abyssinia until they rejoin the community in Medina. This is the first time that Muslims as Muslims deal with Christians as Christians as a community. That's important for us to remember here at this Catholic Jesuit school. There's no sense of enmity against the Christians. They're people that would protect the members of the early Muslim community. That's a very early example of the pluralism, the dialogue, the reactions, the interactions between Muslims and Christians. This Tuesday, we begin, it's weird to think in week 4, we officially begin the LMU school year with the Mass of the Holy Spirit, 11:15 in the sculpture garden. You can see right up there between Sacred Heart Chapel and Xavier. I invite you to attend that. One of the most beautiful names of God in the Quran, listed behind me in the Asma al-Husna, Al-Hadi, the God. I think this is how we as Muslims understand the Christian notion of the Holy Spirit. Al-Hadi, the power of God to guide us in the world. And let me just say a bit about our situation here as Muslims in the United States. First of all, we're here. This is our country, as American Muslims. To borrow a phrase from another poet, the Blessed Langston Hughes, we too are America. Don't forget that. This is your country. This is your home. We're immigrants here. Muhajirun. Some of us came 3 weeks ago to start school here at Amir. Some, like me, came 25 years ago from Canada. But we've been here as Muslims in America for almost 500 years. That's something we often forget. That's my own area of expertise, the history of Islam in America. Estevanico, the Moor, brought as a slave of one of the Spanish conquistadors, came here almost 500 years ago, 1528. Died in 1539. That's 80 years before 1619, before the Jamestown Colony. Think about that for a second. 80 years before the Pilgrims come here, there's already a Muslim who's died here, who's been buried here in what is now typically Arizona. Ayuba Sulaiman Diallo, Job bin Solomon, brought as a slave to Annapolis in 1730. His biography is published in 1734, when George Washington is 2 years old. Think about that for a second. 40 years before the Declaration of Independence, people in London are reading about an African Muslim slave in America. 40 years before the Declaration of Independence. Our history goes back to that slave trade. We have that history. We were brought here, some of us against our will as slaves hundreds of years ago, but some of us willingly coming to seek a new life, a better life. Just like countless other Americans. This is a land of immigrants, after all. We need to connect with those Americans who face difficulties in the current reality of America. African Americans, Latino, Latina, Latinx Americans. This is Latinx Heritage Month. We don't think about the Latino Muslims in this country. There's over 1,000 Latina Muslims. We've had Imam Cesar Dominguez come here, give a khutbah. If you saw Cesar walking down the street and there was a sign around his neck saying, "My name is Cesar Dominguez and I was born in Mexico City," you probably would say, "I bet that guy's a Muslim. I bet that guy's an imam." He's an imam for the Los Angeles Latino Muslim community. We're connecting ourselves with Jewish Americans, for all the intolerance that we as Muslims face in this country. Still, the largest number of hate crimes against a religious group are not against us as Muslims, they're against Jews. We stand together with other folks in community. Let us stand together as a community, connected to and with each other. And let us stand as a community rooted in the justice of the Quran. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم. We are an ummah, which I spoke in the first part, a community rooted in justice. We need to help each other. We, believers, brothers and sisters, are brothers and sisters to each other. That's what the Quran tells us. You all probably know the hadith of the Prophet that not one of you is a believer. And the Prophet used gendered language, unless he wants for his brother, but he wants for himself. We would use inclusive language. Not one of you is a believer unless you want for your brother or sister what you want for yourself. Be examples for each other. Help each other out. We can't, by definition, be a community by ourselves. Connect to each other, talk to each other, say hello to each other, say hello to us afterwards. Before you take a cookie and rush out, just say hello to someone here. Don't be isolated from each other. I had an experience a couple of years ago, just a year before COVID. I was on a mission and ministry trip to Costa Rica, and it happened to be just after the term ended, just after graduation. So it was right in the middle of Ramadan, and I'm fasting. And I'm, you can get an exemption if you're traveling, but I'm old and I can't, if I start fasting, I can't stop and, start again and do the kinds of things. So I'm fasting, in Costa Rica. And I'm the only one in our group that's doing this. And it's lonely. And it's isolated. Like, you're on the bus, you're coming back, and of course they don't plan the bus trip around you. They plan it around, what's convenient for everyone else. And so, you have to break your fast in the back of the bus with a bottle of water that you bring with you. I know what that's like, to be alone and isolated. It's not fun. That's the great thing about being here. There's literally hundreds of us here. The Office of Muslims Who Like that Keenan directs. We've got so many resources. Inshallah, for Ramadan, we'll have iftars. We'll have events for you here. We're connected. And we're not just connected in this life, but in death, in the world to come. I think here what we often say when we have the news that someone's died, from Surah Al-Baqarah. And we, God, will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient who, when disaster strikes them, they say, surely we belong to God, and surely to God we shall return. Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Surely we belong to God, and surely to God we shall return. Many of you may know about the janazah prayer, the funeral prayer for Muslims. I wrote an article about this, a book chapter, several years ago. In Islamic law, the janazah prayer, the funeral prayer, it's fard kifaya. Duty is obligatory on some members of the community, but one for which all members of the community will be held responsible if the duty is neglected. We know that by definition, this is not something the deceased will be able to do for us. No one who dies can pray the janazah prayer for us who are alive. But we don't do it out of altruism, knowing that it can't be reciprocated. We don't do it simply say, oh, I pray this prayer in the hopes that when I die, maybe someone will pray this prayer for me. That's not why we do this in Islamic law. We do it because it's the last right of the deceased on us. The deceased have rights on us. They have a right to be prayed over. They have a right to be buried. In the Hanbali and the Shafi'i schools of law, you can pray the funeral prayer in absentia, meaning you don't have to have the actual body there. For the Maliki and Hanafi schools, no, you have to have the physical body, the corpse. You can't pray in absentia, but two of the schools you can. After this khutbah, I would ask those of you who are willing to stay after the Jummah prayer and after the Sunnah prayer to help me pray the janazah for our friend Krista Silva, campus ministry. His mom, Joyce, passed away earlier this week in Singapore. And we've done this before. I'm not requiring this. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm not saying it's part of Islamic law to pray for non-Muslims. It isn't. But we're human beings here. And we prayed this prayer for our brothers and sisters who passed away without thinking about whether they're Muslim brothers or sisters, because we're connected, remember, at the beginning in that ummah. We prayed this for Pam Rector, who ran our Center for Action. We prayed this for David and Monica, the husband of our Vice President of Student Affairs, Lenny Beauvais. Brother Kenan will lead us in that janazah prayer for those, and it's completely volunteers, not obligatory at all, completely voluntary. Those who want to stay and pray the janazah prayer, Kenan will lead us in that prayer. If you haven't prayed it before, Kenan will explain it to you. It's a wonderful prayer, very different kind of prayer without the sujood, the bowing down. And I think about this here in Los Angeles, because in Los Angeles, we don't talk about getting old. Forget about dying. But we need to think about that, because we're all going to die. We have to think about the legacy that we leave behind. Let me end with one of my favorite lines from the Quran, which is from Surah An-Nisa. Serve God. Do not associate anything with God. Be good to both your parents and to the near of kin and the orphans and the needy and the neighbor who is near and the neighbor who is farther away, and the companion by your side and the traveler and those whom your right hands possess. Surely God does not love the one who is proud and boastful. And what I've translated as be good and be good is even more powerful in the Arabic original of the Quran, which reads that ihsan, do something beautiful for the people it then lists. The text is explicit. Our doing goodness, our showing beauty is not limited to our family, but to those who are in need, whether they're literally our neighbors or someone further away. It's that same emphasis we find in the Torah, it's the same emphasis we find in the New Testament. We're connected as Muslims to each other, to other communities. I ask not just that we remember this line from the Quran, but we do our best to live it out. Ameen. Allahumma sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala alihi Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma aghfir lil muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat على يحيم والأموات إنك سميع مجيب الدعوات. Almighty God, forgive the Muslim men and women, the believing men and women, those who are alive and those who have died. You are indeed the one who listens and accepts all supplications. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والحسن وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. Servants of God, indeed God orders us to be just, to excel in what we do. Be generous and take care of kin and relatives. Never do what is forbidden, nor transgress. The Almighty advises so that you can remember. Wakim as-salam.